The Hard Rock Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence here on the Hard Rock Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. It is the music of June the 19th. Jumping ahead a little bit. We're in the month of July, but we are still in the month of June as far as the music goes. And we are talking another kind of thin week as far as the number of things available, but a wide variety of different stuff. Like it is a very interesting week in music. We're excited to talk about it. Coming up on this edition of the Hard Rock Empire here on YouTube. Week number 2 of us being back in our Monday night time slot. We're glad you have joined us for that. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
Oh, it's going. Yeah, you know, when I originally created the playlist, I was like, man, there's not a whole lot on here, but when it actually came time to listen to the tracks that ended up making the playlist, man, there was a lot of really good music. I was kind of floored by that.
And such a variety of types of music. I think that's the other thing is we've had weeks where we've had a lot of really good stuff, but it's all been in maybe 2 or 3 different genres of rock or metal. And this week we've got a whole bunch of crazy stuff. So we'll post the playlist. You'll see it as a card on the YouTube video. It'll also be down in the comments, so make sure you check that out as well. But it's definitely worth a listen through everything this week because you're going to find a wide range of stuff that there really is one of those there's something for everybody type weeks as far as the music goes. So we're excited to let you take a look at that coming up on this week's edition. Before we get to that, a couple of quick news items just as we were scanning the news wires before we went live. And no big surprise here, but always interesting. Of course, Metallica recently released their reissue of Reload, and not surprisingly, it has done very well. It has popped up on 7 different charts, including the top hard rock albums at number 1, top rock albums at number 3, top rock and alternative albums at number 4, and so forth and so on, and even number 16 on the Billboard 200, which encompasses all music albums. Not a huge surprise here. I know you've had a chance to listen to the reissue, the remaster, and so you'll have some thoughts on that as well. But just generally, anytime these big albums by big bands get released, they're going to pop back up on the charts. So not a huge shock to see this album end up in many different charts as it's been reissued.
Yeah, not surprised at all. It's kind of interesting, too, because I feel like I get more recommendations on YouTube about buy this new CD player, and if I want to get back into CDs, what should I buy? I have to think that helps too, that there is kind of a resurgence of physical media, not just vinyl, but also CDs, and you get a chance to own a multi-disc re-release of Reload, including some of like the demos, live stuff, just a really good value for what you're getting. Why not jump all over it? And I think while there are people who maybe don't appreciate Load and Reload still to this day, I think there are also probably some who didn't originally, but where we've gone since then, especially through kind of the Saint Anger period, and just years, kind of the drought years where Metallica just doesn't release new music all that often anymore. Like they've had, 3 albums since Saint Anger, if I'm counting right. So, you know, you look back at Load and Reload now and you're like, I probably should have appreciated this stuff more back then.
Yeah, and I understand why some of the hardcore fans maybe balked at it. They were 2 of my favorite albums by the band, so obviously I have a different perspective on it than maybe others. But I will also say that I was probably coming into it more as a casual Metallica fan too, as opposed to someone who was diehard really from the demo tape trading days of the 1980s. So I know that's going to impact it. But like you said, with time, a lot of times perspective gets changed. You can look back at something and say, yeah, that wasn't Master of Puppets. That wasn't something that sounded like late 80s, early 90s Metallica, but it was really good. And when you saw what Saint Anger was, when you saw the fact that, like you said, they have kind of very sparse in the new music they've released, maybe you can go back and take a look at these 2 albums and realize, now that I have all these years behind me, like these are actually really good rock albums that if anybody's name on them had been any other band, I think they would have already kind of reached that echelon as two of the best albums that came out in the 90s, but because it was Metallica and their fans were expecting one thing and got something else, it took a while, I think, for that stigma to kind of get over it and realize that these are actually really good.
I also think, too, in having seen Metallica live last year, crowd went nuts for Fuel.
Yeah, it's a great song.
That is a huge live track.
And it's a track that was used everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that probably brought them more casual fans, and it probably also just irritated their hardcore fans at the time even more when every video game, every, montage on YouTube or whatever it may be used that song because it was just a perfect track for that. And I think, again, looking back on it now, I think, like you said, I think fans that go see them now are fired up to see that song, regardless of how you might have felt about it originally. But again, it's a great album. Not surprised to see a lot of people excited to get their hands on the new physical versions of it. And for a lot of people, like you said, CD, maybe the first chance they've had to own the CD of it, or at least, certainly a remastered version of it. But again, vinyl, an option as well. It showed up on the vinyl charts as well, right in the middle of this resurgence of that medium. It's perfect timing. And again, I'm glad to see to some degree that this kind of validates fans who were fans of these albums originally that, hey, look, like these are really good. You need to get your hands on them.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's also an era where, a lot of bands had albums that maybe had one or two good songs and then a bunch of filler. But I think with like Metallica, they really packed the capacity of a compact disc with quality music, load and reload both. Some people may not like certain songs as well as I did, Bad Seed or Prince Charming or something like that. But I thought 1 to 13 Reload is just a really fun listen to this day.
Yeah, for sure. So if you haven't had the chance to pick it up, still plenty of opportunity to do that. You can maybe keep these albums on the chart a little bit longer if you go out and pick up your copy now. But great to see. Anytime there's a physical re-release of anything, it's great to see the support for it. And no surprise, Metallica fans and I think casual fans of just rock and metal have come out in droves to support it. So that's great to see. One other quick story, and we won't spend too long on this one because this is a topic that we can tend to get pretty long-winded about, so we'll keep it relatively short. But story came out this week that a lot of the major music industries, music organizations, everything from the RIAA to the Grammys to some of the unions involved in music, basically come together to come up with an AI identification system for music. And definitely encourage you to read. Blabbermouth had a pretty in-depth article about it, but the gist of it is that you'll see two different AI logos. One is an AI logo on a black background with AI letters in white, pretty largely filling that black box space, meaning that something is AI generated, which means either the lead vocal performance generated by AI or key instrumental performance generated by AI or entirely prompt generated AI music. There's a second one that's kind of a black background with a white box and black letters AI in lowercase. That means AI assisted, meaning that humans perform the lead vocals and primary instruments. However, generative AI was used for some expressive elements. I saw this, and it kind of ties into just some random post I got on Facebook this afternoon, because for whatever reason, Facebook suggests all these accounts you don't follow now instead of the people that you do follow and actually want to see updates for. And one of them was for a record store somewhere, a music store somewhere in Ohio. I don't remember where it was, but they had a sign that basically said like the number of days since somebody came in and asked specifically for an AI artist, and they erased like 17 and put 0 because evidently that's something that must happen regularly at these music stores. So I was not aware that that was a thing, and I guess I'm not even aware of who an AI artist is to even ask for them. But I think this is something where more labeling is going to be a good thing, because I think those who are not using it will be able to say, hey, look, this is us. But it also allows people who are using it at different degrees to just be upfront and honest about it, which, as we've talked about on this podcast, is really all that we've ever asked from artists, is to be honest about it and then let the consumer decide what level of AI usage that they're okay with when they buy their music.
Yeah, again, that was always my thing, is I just want transparency. I think the funny thing, and at the time I was just looking up, there was one AI artist that I remember kind of getting some buzz because they were getting a certain amount of plays on streaming services, and I can't remember the name of it, I guess. But yeah, the funny thing about it to me is, like, we're going to be all gung-ho about this, but in a way, the AI thing almost seems like a scapegoat for all the other kind of ways they've faked making music that now are just going to go under the radar.
Yeah.
It's like all the sketchy, technological advancements that kind of remove the skill gap to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. Now that won't matter because the only thing we're worried about is whether an AI prompt was used.
Well, but the question is going to be, like, how far does that reach? Is it just like an AI prompt, or is it just, hey, we used auto-tune on this, so we're going to have to disclose that, or hey, we used, whatever it may be, because
aren't Vocaloids basically AI?
Yeah, they are. And again, I think they're pretty upfront about that too. Like, because again, that to me, honesty and transparency is the biggest issue here. Because if I'm listening to a Vocaloid, I know I'm not listening to a human being. Now, there are human beings that write a lot of that Vocaloid music, and a lot of the stuff has become popular. So, there are still people working on those sorts of things. I think the bigger problem is when you have artists, and we've seen stories over the last few weeks of artists basically saying, look, when I die, I don't care if they use my voice to make AI music. And again, their prerogative, it's their voice, it's their IP, they're welcome to do whatever they want.
And to be honest, if they can license out their voice, which will then provide compensation for their family after they're gone, in a way that feels like the ethical choice.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully they're giving it to their family after they're gone and not, taking it and burying it with them. I don't know, but again, honesty and transparency is what we want here, and I think there will always be a certain amount of AI that people are going to be okay with. And again, I think if you're going to make an all AI music, if you have it labeled as such and people listen to it and they like it, then you've been upfront about it. So who's it really hurting at that point? And that, I think, is also potentially going to force human artists to step their game up. And maybe they're not going to be able to use some of those tools and tricks to, goose their performances. Maybe they're just going to have to get better because they're going to lose out to some of these computer-generated performances otherwise.
I also think there's a distinction to be drawn, and this applies to pretty much any job. Are you using the AI to simplify something you were going to be doing regardless, as opposed to something you were going to contract somebody else to do for you? Because I think that makes a difference.
Yeah.
If you're just making your life a little easier on work that you were going to be doing, I feel differently about that than saying, well, I could get someone to draw up my cover art for me, or I could have AI do that. Because then you can actually draw the connection. Well, you're not giving someone that gig now.
Yeah, and I think that also needs, because really, it doesn't really say like cover art or music video. I don't know how those fall into these new labels, because to me, we talked about it, and again, we're not going to beat a dead horse because we've been very clear about it. When I turn on one of these videos on this playlist every week and it's got AI in it, I immediately assume the band is using AI for their music. That may not be fair, but that's the only assumption I can draw from that when I see that you're willing to use it so freely in a music video.
I just wish they understood that. As far as I'm concerned, I would rather just see the cover art in a still picture.
Yes.
Or maybe like the lyrics scrolling. That's really all I need. I don't need something that may look cool on the surface level, but I know really no work went into creating.
And the worst part is, it has never been easier to film a music video. Everybody in their own pocket has a powerful camera that you can use. I mean, we have seen commercials and movies filmed with iPhones. Yeah. Like, everybody's got this now. Or you've got an Android, or you've got some other smartphone that does basically the same thing, or you've got a GoPro or something like that. Like, I would rather see something like that and just a still shot, set it up on a tripod, have the band playing their song, edit it together, or don't, just one live continuous shot, and slap it on there. And then I see the band, I see they can play. Like, now maybe you are using AI, but it looks like you're playing. So now it's kind of working the opposite, where it's like, hey, now I think you're even more legitimate.
I also think, given the cost effectiveness of shooting your own video, this is just another easy way to stand out.
Yeah.
If you shoot some low budget creative video, I'm going to remember that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to remember the same AI art sequence that I've seen in several other videos. I just won't.
And again, the other thing we've talked about many times is oftentimes these AI videos and AI art pieces are showing up in artists that have money and can do a low budget shot music video. Like, it's not typically your garage bands. They're the ones actually shooting a really kind of, I say crappy music video, I mean that affectionately. They're doing it on a low budget, whereas these artists who have been around forever that are releasing something new, they're the ones throwing it in an AI and generating something. It's like, that's even more ridiculous.
Well, I also think not only the successful bands, but even the ones who are just getting started and maybe have band camps where their albums are on there, that video is a good way for the viewer to feel some connection with you, like they can relate to you. There's something about the video that makes me say, okay, I want to root for these guys. Let me find their album. Let me pick it up. Let me potentially buy some merch. It's just another entry point to sales, essentially.
Yeah. And it does work the other way. If I see somebody who's just using AI like crazy, it's like, well, maybe I'm not going to listen to the rest of this album, or I'm not going to pick up your album. So, again, like everything else in music, the more upfront and honest you can be, then just let people make the decision, because there will be some people, and maybe it's not even in our generation, but the generation that follows us, who look at AI music the same way they look at regular music. And if that happens, that happens. But again, I think just, again, lay it out there, let people know what you're doing and what you're not doing, and then let them make their decision based on what they want to do. And then I think if you do that, I don't have a problem with it.
If there are people out there making friends with their AI assistants, then who knows?
Yeah, it's anything is possible, and there are things that certainly happen now that generation before us would not have seen as possible. So hard to rule it out, but just interesting and something to keep an eye on. So when you go into your local record store or you go onto your streaming device, 'cause I'll be curious to see how it shows up. Will it show up on Spotify? Will it show up on YouTube Music or Apple Music? We'll see. We don't really know. Details are still kind of limited on that front, but it'll be something to keep an eye on, because it's clearly something that has everybody's attention right now. So I assume we'll hear and see more as we go forward in the days and weeks to come. But anyway, that's kind of the news items off the top. We're going to get ready to get to the new music, of course. The music this week is of June the 19th. An interesting week in music for sure. Not a lot on the playlist, but we will paste Mike's playlist sometime around now. On the video, you'll see it as a card at the top of the screen. You'll also see it down below. So a couple different opportunities to click on the playlist. A thin week as far as the number of tracks, but man, there was so much variety and so many interesting sounds this week that I highly encourage you to check this out. It was really a very enjoyable week of music, and I think even when there's only 20 plus songs on the list, when you get the kind of variety and quality we had this week, I think it makes for a really strong week. Before we get to the picks, of course, Mike and I will each pick one album off of that list to talk about on the podcast. There were some other albums that definitely worthy of an honorable mention, whether it's re-releases, whether it's other good stuff, whether it's big-name acts releasing music. Before we get to the stuff we picked, Mike, let's talk about the stuff we did not pick.
Yeah, so as far as kind of the major releases, if you want to call it that, the only one that I really noted was a compilation, Ride the Rainbow, the ultimate tribute to Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Star-studded compilation, kind of cool. They do have Graham Bonnet and Joe Lynn Turner singing on some of the songs they sang previously in Rainbow, like Since You've Been Gone. Let's see, Stone Cold. But otherwise, you got just crazy names. Sebastian Bach singing Man on the Silver Mountain. You got, Marty Friedman involved in some tracks. Mike Tramp. Vinnie Moore, you have George Lynch, Jonathan Cain, David Ellefson, Derek Sherinian, Chris Poland. I mean,
it's a who's who.
Yeah, basically. Like anyone who probably enjoyed Rainbow back in the day and went on to do great things themselves. Great, classic stuff. I mean, Rainbow, tremendous career. All their incarnations of them, definitely worth checking out. And man, Sebastian Bach gets around on these tribute albums.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about him again in a few weeks when the Transformers the movie soundtrack tribute album comes out, because we had the chance to listen to that this week, and that is at the very least going to be a discussion point, if not a pick, when that week comes out. But yeah, just a who's who. I haven't listened to all of it yet. I've listened to some of it. What I've listened to is it's unsurprisingly great. And if you're a fan of Rainbow, or you're a fan of just classic rock and some of the guys that Mike mentioned, you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't pick that one up this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to re-releases, box sets, and other nonsense. Pride and Joy re-released the self-titled album from 1988 of the band Alien. They're a Swedish AOR band. I wasn't really familiar with them, but after pulling the playlist track for it, I'm like, man, I kind of want to check this whole album out. And I did, and it's amazing. Just really tremendous AOR stuff. Definitely check it out if you get the opportunity. We got Down re-releasing their 2007 album Over the Under. That's Phil Anselmo's band with Pepper Keenan and others. Got another new greatest hits package from Judas Priest. Nothing necessarily jumped out at me about that beyond just being a Judas Priest greatest hits album, which, they have a lot of them. And finally, there is an extended deluxe edition of Kerry King's album from a couple years ago, From Hell I Rise. That kind of ties into the Transformers soundtrack, as well as the lead singer for Kerry King is the lead singer from Death Angel, who appears on the album. Mark Osagueda, I believe his name is, if I remember correctly. So that was really about it for this week as far as noteworthy and re-releases. Albums I did listen to, like I mentioned, I checked out the Alien album. Thrash power metal band from Euclid, Ohio, Destructor. They released their newest album, Tales of Glory, really good as well. Then I kind of went off the beaten path a bit. I listened to the album from Gin Lady, Toads and Diamonds, Volume 1, live in Spain. This is a Swedish classic stoner rock band. Playlist track really caught my attention, so I figured I'd just check it out, and it was actually really solid. Also, I got to listen to most of the band Innuendo, their newest album, Not Lost. Definitely like 80s vibes there as far as like synth, funk, pop rock. Just totally different than what I normally listen to, but worth a listen. And then also Sludgeworth, second time around, an Illinois-based punk band. Always up for punk bands when their singer doesn't have an irritating voice. These guys definitely fit that bill, so that's worth a listen as well.
I need to get back to the Alien album. I listened to the playlist track, and it was tremendous, and I'm sure the whole album is really good. I feel like they've come up on the podcast before because I remember the name, and I remember them being really good, so not a surprise that this re-release is really good. I also listened to Gin Lady and Innuendo. Good stuff. Innuendo was everything that AOR band a week or two ago wasn't. The album was lively. Everything really jumped out at you. It's really all of the 80s kind of compressed into one album, and not just AOR, but you've got some funk, you've got some synth, you've got just kind of like pop rock as well. Like it was in all directions, but XLR8, I guess Innuendo has released, I think that they said that was the 12th release on that label by them since 1995, I think it was. So those guys have been at it for a while. Probably one to keep an eye on, both that label and the band. But I really, really dug that. It was very close to a pick for me this week. But just like I said, the variety of stuff this week it was just really good.
And stuff that I still kind of feel like I want to check out, but I haven't yet. Let's see. Let me narrow down my list again so I can look at everything that made it. We had, let's see, a hard rock band from Norway, the Carburetors. I thought the playlist track was solid. Iron Cobra, heavy metal band from Germany, very traditional metal. There was a split EP from two bands, Hyena and Rising Fall, one from Spain and one from Japan. I got to listen to just the playlist tracks from that, and I'm always kind of like, I always steer away from split albums more often than not for whatever reason, but what I heard that was pretty cool. Another Ohio band, Axemaster, another heavy power metal band, their album of Beasts and Plagues. I thought the playlist track was solid. Then a whole lot of, we had some Viking metal, symphonic metal, just a lot of quality.
Yeah, it was a really good week. Again, encourage you to check out the playlist. I think you're going to find something you like. Probably several things you'll like this week. It was small but mighty playlist this week. Really good stuff. But there can be only two, and we will get to those at this time. I'll be honest, when I saw the imagery for the one band that Mike picked, I thought it was going to be one thing, and then when I went, after Mike picked it, went back and listened to the band, it was not what I expected in a good way. I really thought it was going to be just hardcore Viking metal, and sometimes those are hit and miss. But I really enjoyed what these guys had to offer, so let's get to your pick for this week.
Yeah, so I suppose it's only fair after the U.S. men's national team lost last Monday to Belgium that I would spotlight a Belgian band. So here we are. We're talking about the fifth album from this band. They are Drakkar, and that album is Invasion.
Sadly, Belgium also already out of the World Cup since then.
That was going to be a footnote at the end. Like, oh, yeah, by the way, they ended up losing to Spain, but, you know, this album's still here.
I know it's a quick sidetrack, but, you know, you have this expanded World Cup this year, all these new teams in it. It's been a phenomenal World Cup, whether you're a hardcore soccer fan or even just a casual sports fan. I think it's captivated everybody. But here, after all, 48 teams, we're down to the top 4 ranked teams in FIFA for the semifinals coming up this week. So, of course, everybody who wants an expanded NCAA basketball tournament's like, look, see, we're still going to get the best teams at the end. Yeah, and you get all these extra games that bring you all this excitement. So
money.
And
extra money.
And FIFA came out today and said they're already looking at a 64-team World Cup for 2030. So,
that trucking school down the street's gonna make it.
Oxnard Trucking Academy. Still waiting for their NCAA. I don't think they got their paperwork in on time for that. But if you've never checked out that video from The Onion when they expand the NCAA tournament to like 1,100. I can't remember how many teams, like
1096 or something like that.
96 teams or something like that. But funny stuff. But anyway, I sidetracked there. Let's get back to this Belgian band, which really, really strong stuff from them.
Yeah, so if you look at the metal archives on this band, their history feels a bit incomplete. It shows them being active from 1983 to question mark, then again from 1998 to question mark. Then from 2012 to present, it also points out that Drakkar was a type of Viking longship, which I had no idea. So I'm learning something. That's always a good thing. Their homepage paints a clearer picture, not perfectly clear, but still definitely has more information than Metal Archives. They were founded in 1983. They had to wait till 1987 to record their first demo, but they did get signed to a label in 88 and released their debut album, X-Rated. They got to open for acts like Queensryche, Metallica, Overkill, and Slayer after that. They mentioned Queensryche and Metallica, so I kind of wonder if they didn't open for one of the shows that they played together. In 88 and 89, Metallica and Queensryche were part of the Damage Justice tour, which would have been an amazing show if we're talking like Injustice for All and Operation Mindcrime at that same time. I mean, that would have been ridiculous. Doesn't mention a lot as to the reason for the band's hiatuses, but they did have a couple of them. But the band's been back since 2012, had some lineup changes along the way, but from what I can tell, they currently consist of Guy Duvey on bass, who is a founding member, Lenny Anderson on vocals, Thomas Van Hoorbeek on guitars, Nico RR on guitars, and Adrian Delgambe on drums, who is actually the son of one of the founding members, Tim Delval, so that's pretty cool. Not sure what these guys sounded like back in the late 80s, but based on this album, it seems like they would have fit in really well with the bands they got to open for back then. It's really thrashy, traditional metal. Feels fresher than some of the bands who kind of walk the traditional metal path. Like, it doesn't feel like something that did come out in 1986. The riffs are really interesting. The drums stand out a lot. Your overall opinion might end up falling on how you feel about Lenny Anderson's vocals. I like it. I think it's got hints of like Udo, as well as Overkill, maybe even a bit of Ralph Sheepers in there. It's just kind of different. Like, it feels familiar, but it's not what you hear every day, and I think that's really cool. Album's 9 tracks, 37 minutes, and well worth the time spent. Like you mentioned, and I was going to mention as well, Belgium sadly did lose, but we still got this album, so it all worked out. Standout tracks on the album include Invasion, Mad Clown, 666, and Rock and Roll, The Everlasting Journey, and the track that we're going to listen to, Far Away.
Check these guys out. It's Drakkar with Invasion. This is the third track off of that album, Far Away. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, like I said, when I saw the imagery of the Viking ship, I thought, oh, this is going to be another one of those Viking into battle type albums. So I wasn't, 100% sure I wanted to dive down that road. But then, like I said, when Mike picked them, I thought, well, let's give this a listen. And it turned out to be really great and was not that. Like, even if there are some elements there, it is really just a straight up hard rock metal album. Very modern, but not in a way that a lot of the modern rock comes across. Like it feels very fresh, but not. It's hard to really describe. It's there are some elements of throwback. There are some elements of modern metal, but it really just kind of feels like its own thing. And I think overall, it's a really strong album from beginning to end.
Generally, when I think the term modern metal, I think of something that would list Linkin Park as an influence. Like to me, that's a lot of modern metal vocals kind of have that like Chester Bennington offshoot thing going on, which can work. I'm not always the hugest fan of it, but that's usually what I think of.
Yeah, and this wasn't that.
No, by no means.
But it was really strong. So definitely check those guys out. Drakkar, Mike's pick for this week. I had a pick as well. We are headed back to Frontiers Records. It was, again, a lot of different options for this week, but ended up coming back to a Frontiers release from a melodic rock band from Puerto Rico. This is Mattador with 3, which is listed as III if you are looking for the album. This band was originally founded in 1988, but went on hiatus in 1995 and then reunited in 2022. This is their first album since 1994's Save Us From Ourselves. So great to see these guys back together and making new music. 3 of the original members are still in the band. Carlos Benitez on drums, percussion, background, and lead vocals. Miguel Tito Rodriguez on guitar, lead guitar, and violin. And Mike Villegas on lead vocals and acoustic guitars. And the new member is Abraham Millet on bass and keyboards. This album was co-produced and engineered by Bob St. John. You might know that name as a guy who has worked with Extreme, Dokken, and Collective Soul. So they definitely brought in somebody with experience, which certainly helps anytime you're releasing your first album in a couple of decades. These guys back in their first run played with some big bands. They performed alongside Aerosmith and Iron Maiden on different tours. So definitely guys that have been there kind of at the top of the business. But then a hiatus for a lot of years, getting back together. When I heard the playlist track, Blackwater, which we'll mention, it's a very solid track, but I wasn't 100% sure like it really resonated with me. But when I went back and listened to the whole album, it really kind of locked in and made a lot more sense. And the reason is there really are a lot of different sounds on this. This is not just a straight AOR album, which I think is kind of a nice change from Frontiers when you have just some bands that kind of lean a little bit more towards harder rock than just a straight ahead AOR. They've got a great sound. It feels like the second act for the band could really be a big one. Tracks like Blackwater and Out for Blood are definitely a little bit more on the edge, a little bit harder, while tracks like Levitate, which we're going to listen to in a moment, is definitely more of an AOR sound. It is a something for everyone type of album, I think. I think you're going to really enjoy it if you're a fan of a little bit harder rock, with a little bit of AOR in there as well. Great to see these guys back and excited to see what they do from here. Standout tracks include Blackwater, Out for Blood, Some Kind of Crazy, and the track we'll listen to on the podcast is Levitate. Let's listen to Mattador with 3. This is the 5th track off of this album, Levitate. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
And we would risk it all and
Yeah, like I said, that track definitely more of an AOR style. Harmonies are really good when the songs that really use them. But again, if you'd like something a little more of an edge, there are definitely those tracks on this album as well. A lot of different stuff from Mattador, but again, great to see them back after all these years, and they've started off with a really strong release from Frontiers. Mike, your thoughts?
It's wild how many bands we encounter. I mean, mine was a similar story where their history dates back to the 80s and huge gaps of musical nothing in between. And it's really cool to see. I don't know if it's a matter of just it's more accessible to create music now in the last 5-6 years than it was before, and that's what's driving that, or people are just reaching points in their life where it's like, hey, remember when we used to do this? Let's get back into it. It's really awesome to see.
Yeah, and again, really strong release from those guys. Definitely encourage you to check it out. Mattador, my pick for this week. It's time to go into the vault where Mike and I will each talk about a classic album you need to pick up. Mike has resumed his gimmick that he's running every other week where he is going through year after year and basically finding a standout album from a particular year that is worth talking about. It could be something that's a band's debut. It could be a big turning point album. It might just be an album that Mike's always wanted to listen to and just haven't had the chance. And we are up to 1979 this week, I believe. And this is definitely one that I'm sure is going to evoke some strong feelings from this band, as you will discuss. But there's certainly a memorable release from those guys, but let me throw it over to you for the vault this week.
Yeah, a memorable release and a band that has a very passionate fan base, one way or the other. So, I think it's important to point out before I get into this that I'm not an expert on this band. Don't claim to be. I'd like to listen to more of their stuff, but, I'm not a member of their military, so to speak. But anyway, this is year 11 of me doing this. Let's go ahead and start off by recapping where I've been starting in 1969. Started out with King Crimson in the Court of the Crimson King. For 1970, went to Deep Purple in rock. 1971, Jethro Tull, Aqualung. 72, Uriah Heep, Demons and Wizards. 73, Blue Oyster Cult, Tyranny and Mutation. 74, Queen, Sheer Heart Attack. 75, Rainbow, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. 76, Genesis, A Trick of the Tail. 1977, Kansas, Point of No Return. 78, Rush, Hemispheres. And now 1979. Big year, 1979. And again, you kind of see the writing on the wall as far as where the music industry is heading going into the end of the 70s and into the 80s. Big debuts, you'll kind of notice it here. 1979, Def Leppard released Def Leppard EP. Saxon released their self-titled album. Samson released the album Survivors, Samson being notable because that was Bruce Dickinson's band prior to Iron Maiden. And finally, the other big debut, Iron Maiden, the Soundhouse Tapes, debut EP, more of like a demo, I think. But again, clearly the new wave of British heavy metal is reaching that point where it's about to pop, but you have all these major bands in that genre kind of just getting their start. Other big releases that year, Scorpions, Love Drive, Supertramp, Breakfast in America, Motorhead, Overkill, Journey, Evolution, Van Halen 2, Foreigner, Head Games, and AC/DC, Highway to Hell.
Yeah, I talked about Supertramp's Breakfast in America when I went through my gimmick of running through the 70s, and it was a great album, but it was among many, many great albums in 1979, a really strong year as you started to see that transformation from what you would consider to be 70s rock and what would kind of lead into 80s rock and metal, because there was kind of a turning point. But there were still some bands that maybe were still doing 70s rock to some degree that weren't quite ready to let that go just yet.
Yeah, and I think you have bands that are they've kind of reached that point where they know they have to do something a little different. They just don't know what direction to take that in. I really wanted to make sure as I went through year by year that I hit all the classic bands at least once. So it's probably unfair that I picked this year to hit this band, given they had several really big albums in the 70s and kind of reinvented their career in the 80s that we aren't quite there yet. But so for 1979, we were going to talk about the legendary Kiss and their album Dynasty.
Yeah, this is definitely one that you mentioned their militant fan base that we'll definitely get some opinions if you ask somebody about it, and they'll probably be pretty strong opinions.
What's interesting, and I don't know if this is just the result of many, many years, but when I just did a quick search for like reviews of the album. A lot of the search results, like as I'm reading the description of the website, sounded fairly positive. So I get the feeling that maybe kind of like a load and reload situation, years pass and people just kind of come to peace with it. Like, maybe this wasn't Love Gun, but it's actually pretty solid. Yeah, so going into this album, this is Kiss's first album in 2 years as far as being a full group studio album since Love Gun in 1977. Each band member brought demos to the table for the album. Let's see. According to Wikipedia, it mentioned Peter Criss brought in a song Dirty Livin', which he had actually done in a pre-Kiss band originally, but that kind of set the tone for like the disco experimentation. The band brought on Vinnie Poncia to produce the album. He felt Peter Criss's drums were substandard. Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons agreed, and studio drummer Anton Fig was brought in to play drums on all but one track. Criss also ends up being credited on the follow-up album, Unmasked, but doesn't play drums on it at all, with Fig doing the duties there. After that, Eric Carr is brought in ultimately as the full-time replacement. Something else kind of strange on the Wikipedia for this album, it mentions that three of the songs that Ace Frehley brought that actually made the album, his cover of 2000 Man, Rolling Stones song, Hard Times, and Save Your Love. It says he was the only member of Kiss to actually perform on any of those songs, which is kind of weird, especially because they had just had their solo albums like a year before this. You would think they would have actually wanted to collaborate a little more together, but it could be kind of a sign of where the band was at this point, since Frehley would be out of the band a few years later. I Was Made for Loving You, surprisingly, was the first Kiss song to receive a disco remix. I'm not sure if it's something I want to check out anytime soon. It's a 7-minute and 54-second version of the song on a 12-inch single. It also mentions, kind of going back to the weird like solo efforts on this album. The songs Magic Touch, Sure Know Something. Paul Stanley sings, plays all the guitars and bass on those tracks, which again struck me as kind of odd. Honestly, this isn't a bad album. And the rock landscape had shifted a lot since both Kiss began in 1974 and even 1977 when their last studio album hit. You got arena rock bands like Journey, REO Speedwagon, and Foreigner really hitting their strides at this point. Then you got kind of that next crop of kind of the hard rock bands, your AC/DCs, Van Halen, Scorpion, Motorhead, like all right there, not to mention the new wave of British heavy metal that's kind of on the horizon as well. So you got to think at this point, Kiss had to realize like, okay, we need to come up with something a little different this time around. Looking through the Wikipedia and some of the reviews, a lot of the criticism for the album comes from the production. People saying that a lot of the songs that were supposed to rock, the way it was mixed and produced just kind of felt hamstrung, like they weren't letting them be kind of that raw Kiss vibe that they had in the 70s up to that point. I Was Made for Loving You gets a lot of attention for being the disco song, but to me, the song that's way more notable is another Paul Stanley song, Sure Know Something. It's just a straight AOR song. Like, it's probably the best song on the album, but it is not disco. It's not just 70s rock. It's an AOR track, and it's a good song. There's another song, Gene Simmons' song Charisma. It, to me, felt like a classic Kiss song based on kind of my fairly rudimentary understanding of what Kiss is supposed to sound like. So, again, that felt like them. It kind of feels like they weren't sure what their next step was going to be after the 70s, how they were going to fit into rock in the 80s. And, after this, you got Unmasked, Music from the Elder. It was going to be a bumpy ride. So enjoy this album because it's going to get a little rough after this. Standout tracks on the album include I Was Made for Loving You, 2000 Man, the Rolling Stones cover, Sure Know Something, Charisma, and Magic Touch. It's a solid album. I can understand people being a little hurt about I Was Made for Loving You at the time, but all things considered, it's solid.
And as you pointed out in the Discord, 1.6 billion listens.
Yeah.
People have listened to that song like crazy. Just as a totally unrelated corollary to that, because I'm doing Journey again this week, I was looking at some of the listens on the tracks on the album I'm talking about this week, and then I went back and looked at Don't Stop Believing, and it's at like 900 million listens. So you're talking about something that's almost twice as many listens as probably the most pervasive Journey song you know. Really tells you that there are a lot more fans of that song out there than maybe what people want you to believe.
It is what it is. Like I'm not a pro or anti-disco person. I have very few feelings about that style of music, but Kiss's take on it, it's fun to listen to.
Two footnotes, because I always like to try to find some sort of fun footnote. Anton Fig, maybe people of our generation might know him better as the drummer for Paul Schaefer's band on the David Letterman show.
Yeah.
He joined in 1986 in the World's Most Dangerous Band, and then when Letterman went to CBS in 1993, he continued on with that band and would also be the house band for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So Anton Fig certainly continuing on. And then George Marino, who did the mastering. If you've never looked at all the albums that George Marino has mastered or did master, he passed away in 2012, it is just a wild list. It is everything from bands like, Iron Maiden and Dio and AC/DC to, bands you might consider to be one-hit wonders in the 80s, like Go West and The Outfield and Donnie Iris, and did Chicago 17 in 1984. So Bon Jovi, Iron Maiden, he did a Bill Cosby comedy album. Probably don't put that on the resume anymore. Wasp live in the Raw in 1987. Like, the list is... all the way up really to his passing. He was involved in mastering these albums. It's definitely worth taking a look at. A guy who was very, very active in the music scene, and probably a lot of your favorite albums from the 60s on probably had his hand in it before it went out to the public. So just an interesting thought.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's move on to my vault pick. As I mentioned, we are talking Journey, which means I can put up this list once again. This is the tier list up to this point of the Journey albums we've checked out. Certainly coming off of a good one. The question is, will this week's list or this week's album dethrone last week's as the greatest Journey album of all time? We will talk about that in a little bit. But we are on to 1983, and this is the release from 1983, Frontiers. It's the 8th studio album by Journey, released February 1st, 1983 by Columbia Records. It was the band's last album to feature bassist Ross Valory until 1996's Trial by Fire. We'll talk more about that at the end of this. Obviously, it's a really strong album. Reached number 2 on the Billboard 200 chart, would garner 4 top 40 singles. After the Fall reached number 23. Center My Love reached number 23. Faithfully got to number 12. And Separate Ways, Worlds Apart, number 8. A fifth song off of that first side, Chain Reaction, was also a radio hit as well. Received 6 times platinum from the RIAA. Classic rock critic Paul Elliott declared Faithfully to be the greatest power ballad of all time. We won't get into the debate again on whether it's a power ballad or not, because I don't know what level of power your band has to have a power ballad. But as far as rock ballads go, it is absolutely one of the best. To me, this album the people who made the decisions for this album made 2 critical mistakes that probably would have made this the greatest Journey album of all time. After the album was pressed, they decided at the very last minute to replace 2 of the songs that were on the album with 2 other songs. The 2 songs that were pulled from the album were Ask the Lonely and Only the Young, probably 2 of their greatest songs, replaced by Backtalk and Trouble Child. Really makes that B-side of this album pretty weak, and Backtalk is a song that really should have never been released by anybody anywhere, and really pulls down the B-side of the album. Those 2 songs, of course, would be released. Ask the Lonely was utilized in the soundtrack for the film Two of a Kind. Only the Young was finding its way into the top 10 2 years later as part of the soundtrack to the movie Vision Quest. If those tracks are on this album, this is without question the best Journey album of all time. The cast and crew of this album, the same as the last: Steve Perry on lead vocals, Neil Schon on lead guitar and backing vocals, Jonathan Cain on keyboards, rhythm guitar, backing vocals, and the Roland Jupiter 8 on the first track, Separate Ways, Worlds Apart, which is certainly a memorable keyboard part. Ross Valory on bass guitar and backing vocals, and Steve Smith on drums and percussion. As far as reviews, Condestine of Rolling Stone awarded this album 2 stars out of 5, stating it's hard to say what Journey is up to on Frontiers. While several band members have signaled a shift toward a less commercial sound, Considine noted it's hard to believe the Journey thought there was any risk involved. Indeed, in some ways, this is the band's most conservative effort yet. AllMusic gave it a positive review, though noted that they utilized the same musical recipe as Eclipse. Frontiers felt a little short because the keyboard seemed to overtake both Sean's guitar playing and Perry's strong singing. The Village Voice gave it a D+, remarking that the album served as a reminder of how much worse things might have been. This top 10 album could have been outselling Pyromania, Flashdance, or even Thriller. Whatever. All great albums in their own right, but let's get real. And 2005, Frontiers was ranked at number 363 on the Rock Hard Magazine's book, The 500 Greatest Rock and Metal Albums of All Time. I know Don't Stop Believing has become the band's signature song, played literally everywhere, but for my money, Separate Ways, Worlds Apart should actually have that spot. To me, it's the best of what they were going to do with this sound, and to me is a quintessential arena rock banger. The first side, as I mentioned, really strong with the 4 singles and Chain Reaction, which is a really good one. But the second side, really a little bit weaker. As I mentioned, Back Talk is just not a good song. It sounds like it was written for a 1980s TV show theme. If they threw that together just because they had a hole in the album, it comes across that way. The rest of the B-side is okay, but definitely skip that one. Because of that, it does earn a spot in the second category as the great hits, but not quite the best. To me, it's the second best. But unfortunately, just if you put those other 2 songs on there, I think it's number 1 in my book. But without those 2, I think it is lacking something that just doesn't quite get it over the top. Standout tracks, as I mentioned, the A-side. Just listen to the A-side. The B-side is good, other than Back Talk. In 2 weeks, we're going to start seeing the cracks form in Journey with Raised on Radio from 1986. We're going to see a couple of longtime members depart the band. We're going to see Steve Perry take over producing role. And clearly, things were about to shake out with Journey as their success and Perry's success as kind of the leader of the band is going to kind of come to a head, which is unfortunate. But another really good album coming up in 2 weeks, so we'll talk about that then. Like I said, that A-side is maybe as good a side as they've had on any record, and one that honestly I'd listen to over and over again. Just really, really strong stuff from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I didn't realize that Only the Young wasn't, and even Ask the Lonely weren't album tracks at any point. I knew that Vision Quest had like a really strong soundtrack. Like I was familiar vaguely with knowing that. But man, if you look at it, it's ridiculous. You got obviously Only the Young. You got Don Henley on there. You got Hungry for Heaven by Dio. Great song. Lunatic Fringe, Red Rider, Hot Blooded, Foreigner, I'll Fall in Love Again, Sammy Hagar, among others. Just tremendous soundtrack. But yeah, if you would have put those songs back on the Journey album, that it should have been too powerful, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Even on that Vision Quest, even Crazy for You by Madonna, as far as her music at the time, that's the final track. That's a really good one as far as a pop song. But yeah, that is a great album, and obviously maybe that, certainly helped the Vision Quest soundtrack, I guess, a little bit. But to me, those 2 songs are 2 of my all-time favorite Journey songs. If you put them on this album, would have been really, really strong. But again, going to run into some problems starting in 1986, and we'll kind of get to that.
Probably also worth noting that this album does mark the first appearance of American Idol judge Randy Jackson.
Yeah,
contributing to Journey, playing bass on After the Fall.
He's going to make more of an appearance as we get into 1986 Raised on Radio, and I found out as I was going through some of their later albums, he ends up coming back to the band a little bit later on it passed probably about the time, maybe a little after he was doing American Idol. So
that's interesting.
Legendary guy in the music industry,
sure.
Even more so than his American Idol stuff. But this is his first time he pops up, and he's going to have a stronger role as again, the band's about to go through some pretty serious changes and eventually a hiatus because of some of those changes, which is certainly a shame. But we'll get to that in a couple of weeks. Again, really good album. Can't recommend it enough. But as far as greatest of all time, it falls just a little bit short in my book. With that said, it is time to wrap up this edition of the Hard Rock Empire. Thank you so much for joining us once again. Music of June the 19th did not disappoint, and a couple of great albums in the vault to check out. Coming up next Monday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, it'll be the music of June the 26th as we wrap up the month of June. Hopefully it'll be another strong week in music, and of course we'll be back in the vault as well, so we hope you will join us coming up next Monday night. Big thanks for Mike, as always, for his hard work on the podcast. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of the podcast, and a big thanks to you for listening whenever and wherever you listen to our podcast. But that's going to wrap things up for the entire crew. I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Hard Rock Empire.